The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening just turned 30 years old, and you know me, I'll always take an occasion to be nostalgic. If you're feeling a bit nostalgic yourself, you can play Link's Awakening DX right now as part of the Nintendo Switch Online Game Boy library. You just need a base Nintendo Switch Online subscription. Before we jump in, here's where I stand with the Zelda franchise as a whole. I've played Ocarina of Time, Majora's Mask, Wind Waker, A Link to the Past, The Link's Awakening Remake, Breath of the Wild, and Tears of the Kingdom. Tears of the Kingdom is my favourite, followed by Breath of the Wild. Third place is a tough call between Wind Waker and Majora's Mask, but I think Wind Waker just clinches it. I'm not a massive Zelda fan, but I've played a decent array of the games and loved every single one of them. This little bit at the start is just so you know how seriously to take my opinion. With that out of the way, sorry remake, you're very pretty, but we're going all the way back, and letting you know if The Legend of Zelda Link's Awakening DX is worth your time. The fact that this game existed on the Game Boy is nothing short of a miracle. Link's Awakening simply feels like an adventure, and manages to forge its own gameplay identity whilst still adhering to that classic Zelda formula. You know the drill: explore the world, fight some monsters, unlock some dungeons, gain a new ability, and beat a boss. There's even some extra surprises thrown in, like some 2D platforming sections. In terms of Zelda gameplay, Link's Awakening isn't massively branching out. With that said, the core experience is still well woven and engaging 30 years later. The world map isn't that big, but there's always a mystery tugging at you. How do I get over these gaps? How do I destroy these rocks? What do the books in the library do? Why is there a Yoshi and a Chain Chomp and a Goombas? Each dungeon pokes and prods your imagination and has you thinking on a large scale, and the aha moments feel truly great. Enemies feel varied and unique, and the boss fights manage to feel menacing yet interesting and fair. The new abilities you unlock from dungeons open up the world in a wonderfully dynamic way, and it really forces you to pay attention and learn where everything is and how it all connects together, because those rocks you found in Hour 1 can now be broken to reveal a secret in Hour 5. Koholint Island manages to feel like a real place, bristling with life, danger and secrets. Unfortunately, it's not all hunky-dory. Link's Awakening may not have aged a day in terms of game design, but it has aged in feel. Link is getting a bit unresponsive in his old age. Between the joystick and D-pad, he never felt fully responsive. There was always a little delay. This isn't game-breaking, but it is noticeable. There's also the issue that most of the older Zelda games fall into. The way forward is usually fairly strict and equally very vague. When playing through the game for this review, I actually didn't notice this problem, and of course I didn't, because I've played Link's Awakening before. Games aren't vague when you know all the answers. So I cast my mind back to 2020 when I first played the remake, and yeah, I had a tough time knowing where to go and what to do. The game does try to mitigate this. An owl will swoop down and tell you what to do. You can phone a friend and he'll tell you what to do. This is the sort of thing that can go both ways. The vagueness can be seen as enhancing the adventure and discovery aspect of the game, or it can be a bad thing that enhances frustration. I think the issue that Link's Awakening runs into is the game tells you what you need to do, but not quite how you get there. They'll say, hey, you need to go to the swamp, but it's up to you to figure out where the swamp is and what you need to do once you arrive. I leant towards the latter on my first playthrough. The lack of direction left me stumbling around, and whilst on my second playthrough I was coming around to the sense of adventure, knowing all the answers, I think it's more fair to judge the game on that first experience. Still, Link's Awakening is excellent. It really hasn't aged a day in terms of mechanics, and is still a joy to play. It will have you stumbling around in the dark for a bit, but once you come into the light, it's all worth it. We're giving the gameplay a high 4 out of 5. The art direction is just as much of a Game Boy miracle as the gameplay, if not more so. Sure, the remake took the art direction and elevated it to the stratosphere, but the original still looks fantastic to this day and blends with gameplay wonderfully. Every element you can interact with in this game is clear, and the tile-based design of the world only emphasizes this. It's a very creative use of limitations to convey information to the player. Koholint Island also looks fantastic in its pixel style, and the blend of all the environments present is fantastic. There was a lot of care taken to make each region of the island feel coherent, yet distinct, and this is only enhanced by the soundtrack. Telltale Heights is the obvious standout. It's one of the best Zelda tracks ever made. but every single piece of music in this game stands the test of time. It's goofy, mysterious, and always has that oomph of adventure. Shifting back to visuals, character and enemy designs are all clear and unique. There's also a surprising amount of fluidity in movement, from the witch shimmying to the children running at you. Enemies all have their own unique designs, and attacks are shown clearly. Bosses feel extra scary with just how big and fast they get. Swinging back, sound design is excellent. Everything is relatively simple, but always enhances the action. That lightning strike at the beginning of the game sounds huge, swinging your sword sounds swift, and enemies, especially bosses, sound nice and scary. UI design is nice and clear too. The map screen is the exception, it's a bit too vague, but it's enough to direct you. Dungeon maps are great, and always do a good job of pointing you to where you need to explore next. I'm floored. Link's Awakening manages to have art direction that blends with gameplay wonderfully and still looks and sounds great to this day. It's an easy 5 out of 5. What starts as a simple setup and familiar formula quickly evolves into something much more existentially terrifying. I'm reminded a lot of Majora's Mask with Link's Awakening. The setup is that Link is sailing in a storm and gets shipwrecked on the mysterious Koholint island, home of the sleeping windfish. In order to escape the island, Link must awaken the windfish by collecting instruments to play him a song. Throughout your journey, you'll encounter a wonderful cast of colourful characters, each of whom is a joy to interact with, but the real kicker that elevates the narrative here is the ending, which I won't spoil here. Link's Awakening is very early proof that game narratives could be more. Surprising and uncomfortable and joyous and sad in all the best ways. It really has stuck with me for the past 3 years and had an even greater impact on a replay. We have to keep this short because the more I talk, the more I risk spoiling, and we don't do spoilers, but the narrative of Link's Awakening gets the full 5 out of 5. This is what sets Link's Awakening apart from the rest. Link's Awakening is a grand content package and technically sound. This is the first game that we've played on these Switch emulators that had 0 performance issues. Content-wise, you're getting the full island of Koholint to explore, chock full of enemies, dungeons, and characters to interact with. It's an insane scope for the Game Boy. You also get free save slots. Settings-wise, you get nothing. Nada. You are required to take Link's Awakening as it comes, and whilst it comes well, absolutely no tweaks is a bit much. The crux of the issue here is subtitles. The game has no voice acting, and this means that subtitles are the only way that voiced information can be conveyed. The font use isn't unreadable, but it isn't seamless. Thankfully, subtitles have a background and don't progress until you hit the button, so whilst they are a little tough to read, it's not a massive issue, you can take your time. Overall, the specs here are getting a 4 out of 5. This is a solid content offering, but the complete lack of settings does knock a point off. It's going to take you between 10 to 15 hours to complete Link's Awakening. This is a solid length, and the game does a good job to justify that length. The only commitment issue here is that vagueness we talked about in the gameplay section. The game can feel like it's wasting your time at times with just how little direction it's giving you. Thankfully, gameplay is nice and easy to break up into different amounts of free time. As with all Switch Online games, you can create suspend points at your leisure. Dungeons always throw you back to the starting room when you die, but you keep your progress, and towards the end you even get a teleport a few rooms away from the boss fight, so retries are a bit fairer. The game does a good job of letting you hop in, play a little bit, and hop back out, which it should. It was a Game Boy game. Hard drive footprint is also tiny. All you need is 82.7 megabytes. As with all of these Switch libraries, this includes all of the games available. You can't install Link's Awakening on its own, but the overall footprint is tiny. Link's Awakening is getting a nice 4 out of 5 on our commitment scale. It's doing a lot right, but still falls into the same old Zelda trappings. Link's Awakening is still worth your time. What a wonderful game. I cannot fathom the wizardry that managed to squeeze this into a Game Boy. It's definitely one of the weirder Zelda games, but that makes it all the more special. If you made it to the end of the video, thank you, and if you like what we do, consider subscribing, and go play Link's Awakening. It really is a gem 30 years later.